So the server will know the exact moment you fired your shot, jumped your jump, or peeked your peek. And the server will calculate your precise actions between ticks. So what you see is what you get.
So this statement has been memed on for good reason, in my opinion. But before we get into it, let's do a short recap of what Subtick actually does. So first of all, CS2 servers run on 64 tick. That means ideally the servers and client send new ticks every 15.4 milliseconds. On 128 tick, that would be half obviously, so 7.8 milliseconds. And if your client then inputs an action, for example moving or shooting, that input will be timestamped. On your screen, with Subtick, the inputs will happen instantly or on the next frame, depending on your frame rate. So if you press a movement key, if you press a shooting key, the animations will happen instantly on your screen. But the server will receive the info only on the next tick. The server will then look at the timestamp of when you did the action between the ticks and basically calculate the difference. So it takes into account like, okay, you were already strafing for more than a couple of milliseconds, but the tick was only sent later. So I will take it into account and make it so that you were already running or strafing or shooting on the server earlier. So let's quickly compare that to CSGO. In CSGO, updates only happen on the next tick. That means you can click mouse 1 for shooting, but the position where your bullet will actually land will be where you're aiming the moment the tick is sent to the server. So maybe you've seen these videos, you can shoot at the position in CSGO, flick in slow-mo, and then the bullet will land where you're later aiming. And the same will be with movement in CSGO. So basically your movement will be synchronized with the tick rate. If you hit a movement key, the movement will be executed, the animations on the next tick, and not like in CS2 on your client side instantly. So Subtick is just a clear improvement then. Inputs will happen instantly on your client instead of only at the next tick. And the server will interpolate the difference between when your input happened and when the tick was sent. So essentially your inputs are only limited, your input tick rate, let's call it, is only limited by your FPS. As instead of CS where it's basically synchronized with the server tick rate. Now this is where we get to the main problem. In CS2, what you see is what you get, but what you see is not what everyone else gets. Let me give you an example. Imagine you hit a strafe key in a direction. On your screen, you start strafing on your next frame. And when the tick reaches the server, it will calculate as if you're already running for up to 15.4 milliseconds or a whole tick in the worst case scenario. This will result in cases where when you peek someone, you will see them up to a tick earlier than in the same scenario as in CSGO. That means in CS2, holding angles has become really hard as a result, and it's essentially changed how you play and position on CT sides. You try to avoid holding angles and basically play for peaks. It just makes T side stronger as a result. But that's not all, there's more. In CS2, new movement tech has emerged that capitalizes on Subtick. Namely, the donk slide, you might have heard of, or just people crouching a lot in gunfights in general. So why is this so strong in combination with Subtick? Let's first look at crouching and apply our Subtick knowledge. When you first hit a crouch in between a tick, you will start crouching at the next frame on your screen. But in the worst case scenario, actually it was right after a tick, so the server will look at the timestamp and will see that, oh, you didn't just start crouching at the tick, you were already crouching for almost a full tick. And since you were already crouching for longer, on your enemy screen it will basically look like your crouch and uncrouch much faster than it actually was. In gunfights it will feel like at one shot you're basically aiming at the upper body, and on the next shot your opponent is already fully crouched and you're just missing your entire spray. So since you start moving earlier on your screen and the server takes it into account, it will just for the opponent look like you're doing things much faster than you're actually doing them. The donk slide combines the worst of this. Let me give you an example. If you strafe in a direction and you start counter strafing, on your screen the counter will be instant on the next frame. But in worst case, the server will only know that you start counter strafing on the next tick from your timestamp. So what happens on the server side while you're already counter strafing? The server looks at your last available info. For example, you strafe left, and since it doesn't have any new info, it will just assume you're still strafing left, of course. And this interpolation makes it basically smoother. Instead of just teleporting between ticks, it will look like a fluid motion. So, while the server thinks you're going left, you are actually already going right for up to a whole tick. And when the server receives the new information, it will look, okay, you will actually already counter strafing, so we need to update it. And your counter strafe will now appear much faster for everyone else, since you were already counter strafing for longer than they could see. If you combine this with a well-timed crouch, you become basically unhittable, because your opponent needs to basically predict something that hasn't happened on the screen yet. And for you, it's just perfect inputs, and you can just play as normal. Once again, this wasn't happening in CSGO, as in CSGO, if you input on your screen, the animation, everything, it will only happen on the next tick. So essentially, your inputs are synchronized with the server tick rate. Subtick will cause visual inconsistency with kill feedback as well. If you shoot at someone on your screen, the animations will happen instantly, the firing animation, everything. But the tick can be sent to the server either if it's right before a new tick, it will be almost instant, or in the worst case, it will be a whole tick. So in Go, your animation would only happen at the tick. And the time delay from when your animations happen and the kill would be really consistent. But in CS2, it's inconsistent because the time can vary a whole tick in difference. It won't be like CSGO wasn't faster. It's still slower, or just as slow maximum as Subtick, but it's consistent. So you know when you shoot at someone, how long it's going to take for them to fall. In CS2, it's hard to tell. It differs. You can tell that if you look at pros, and you need to check if they killed someone, how many bullets will they fire actually after the opponent already died. In CSGO, if they shot, it was like maximum 1 to 2 bullets they waste after that. In CS2, if pros are spraying, you will regularly see 3 to 4 shots after the opponent is already dead, because you don't know. Is it going to be fast feedback? Is it going to slow feedback? It's hard to tell. So, as you never know when the kill will happen in correlation to your visual feedback and your gun firing, you you don't really know what's going to happen, so it will feel really inconsistent. Also, I'm sure that recoil feedback bug that people talked about isn't helping as well. So how can we address these issues? First of all, I think actually movement probably shouldn't be subticked. It increases peak at advantage in some cases and makes hitting, moving, and counter-strafing targets much harder than in CSGO. While it will feel better on your screen, you get the negative of constantly being Ferrari peaked. So it punishes bad peaks less, and it basically forces everyone to play for peaks and destroys angle holding and some tactical play. So another way how you could make things feel more consistent would be to actually delay the client animations, the visual feedback. If you make an input right after a new tick, so when you start moving or shoot right after a new tick, it should do the animations only 7.8 milliseconds before the new tick is sent. So this will avoid worst case scenarios where the time between your animations and the tick actually being sent is really large. It would essentially make your inputs 128 tick instead of a better or faster, potentially higher tick rate that is tied to your FPS with subtick. That would kind of defeat the purpose of Subtick, because you're not really subticking anymore for the first half of a tick, but it will make the discrepancy less, and the feedback will match more what is actually going to happen on the server and when you get server feedback. So it will make things kind of slower on your side. It will make them more consistent. It will make better prediction and everything. Beyond that, if it were me, I would just make CS2 128 tick tomorrow, or at least allow third parties like Faceit to configure their servers how they want. Although 128 tick won't solve any of these issues we talked about, it will at least make worst case scenarios half as bad. Because if you update the server twice as often, it's not going to matter as much if this happens. At this point in the game, I'm sure basically no one would mind relearning all the smokes if the game feels better as a result because of the state the game is in. And besides, I think one reason why Valve decided it's all going to be 64 tick, I think they tried to kind of set up Premiere as the way people go, where people go to get better, to improve, to one day reach the pro level. But that has kind of clearly failed. Like top level Premiere, like the very top is a lot of cheaters. So it's not like really where you go to get better, so you still go to face it anyway. So I don't think even casuals would mind like having a split, like seeing pros throw smoke and you can't do it on your own server because it's different. I don't think anyone cares about that. So while Valve might never implement 128 tick in their own servers, I think at the very least they should not force everyone to play 64 tick. Like let the people decide.